Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. This is the POSO Euro Dispatch Day 3, and, well, the cat's out of the bag. I have not been recording these dispatches from Germany nor from Brussels. I have, in fact, been recording these dispatches from the territory of Ukraine. I accompanied Secretary Bessent as part of his delegation from the Trump White House to Kiev, Ukraine, arrived there overnight by train, 10 hours in on the train, 10 hours out. Visited with the Ukrainian Prime Minister, the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, and yes, also visited President Zelensky there in his presidential complex. As you know, Secretary Bessent held his meeting with President Zelensky where they discussed this situation with the rare earth minerals and the deal that Zelensky had offered to President Trump regarding the peace for U.S., Russia, and Ukraine for ending the war. This was the centerpiece of the entire situation. Now, obviously, we couldn't be public about this trip because of security purposes, but the entire time we were completely secured. We had a traveling delegation of Secret Service dispatched by President Trump, as well as military and motorcade escorts when we arrived on the ground. What people need to understand is that it's been 3 years of a terrible war, a horrific war that never had to happen. Had the Biden administration not been so aggressive with the expansion of NATO, had there been any effort for peace, had there been any effort for real negotiation, it's possible this could have been avoided. And that's really what it comes down to, folks. This was an unnecessary war. It was certainly a provoked war, and it's a war that takes two to tango, which means it's going to take two to get to peace. If wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. Now, 3 years later, Human Events Daily is on the ground yet again in Ukraine, showing you the inside story of what's happening inside these negotiations. Secretary Bessent met with Zelensky only hours after Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, delivered a blistering statement in Brussels at the NATO conference. Hegseth saying that the pre-2014 borders for Ukraine were not going to happen, that NATO membership for Ukraine was not going to happen, that the United States would not send troops to the territory of Ukraine in any security post-war situation or agreement. These are things that led Zelensky at the meeting potentially to not sign the deal. So Secretary Bessent arrived with a copy of the mineral deal with him. He handed it to President Zelensky. Zelensky looked at it, said that he wanted a security guarantee. The security guarantee would be a de facto NATO membership. This was not part of the deal. He also said again and again that he wanted to meet with President Trump. Secretary Bessent urged him to sign the deal. President Zelensky did not, but said that he would revisit it potentially when he meets with J.D. Vance in Munich on Friday. This is a very critical point, ladies and gentlemen, because then, just as we were walking out of the presidential complex, the presidential palace there in Kiev, that's when President Trump, almost to the very minute, posted his Truth Social saying that while we had been inside and the secretary was there meeting with Zelensky and holding a press conference, that President Trump had spent the entire same hour on the phone with Vladimir Putin. So he gave Zelensky the opportunity to sign the deal first. Zelensky didn't sign the deal right away. That's when President Trump posted the Truth Social that has now been heard around the world, one that has the European leaders absolutely apoplectic that President Trump is cutting them out and saying that the neoconservatives and the European leaders, the NATO countries are going to be cut out because he said, look, if you aren't funding this war and if you aren't paying your NATO dues, then why should I include you directly in the negotiations? I'm going to go straight to the heart of the matter. And he spoke with President Putin directly for over an hour at the same time that Secretary Bessent and the delegation were there in Kiev. Then Zelensky immediately hopped on the phone and said, let me call Trump, let me call Trump, let me call the president. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot going on in this world. There's a lot of moving pieces here. J.D. Vance, Secretary Hegseth, Secretary Bessent will now be joined in Munich with the newly minted DNI Tulsi Gabbard, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. It remains to see what happens with the Vance-Zelensky summit tomorrow in Munich.